There was a time just a couple months back where the Las Vegas Raiders general manager, John Spytek, had mentioned Jackson Powers-Johnson and had said that this guy would potentially be a starting guard for the Raiders, right? He'd essentially be competing for that position. He also said there'd be three guys competing for the center position. This happened at the NFL's owner meeting in the end of March. Vic Tafur actually tweeted it out. I believe it was a private conversation. And he put it out there. He said one of the interesting details from our chat with John Spytek was that Spytek basically said the Raiders are looking at four guys competing for the two starting guard spots: Powers-Johnson, Dylan Parham, Alex Kappa, and Jordan Meredith. Now, at this time, this wasn't necessarily surprising because those were the four guys that would end up starting on the inside, right? And then he also kind of put it out there that there will be, the other three guys other than Kappa will compete for the center job, right? So essentially, Powers-Johnson, Dylan Parham, and Jordan Meredith will essentially compete for center. I tweeted this and I said it'd be a big mistake for the Raiders not to have Jackson Powers-Johnson in that center. And Jackson Powers-Johnson has basically confirmed that he is the Las Vegas Raiders starting center. There was a video in which was posted to the Raiders YouTube channel and their social media platforms in which Ashton Jeanty showed up into the Raiders building and he was greeted by Jackson Powers-Johnson saying the following.
What's up, Jackson? I'm your center. Nice to meet you, man.
And that, to me, basically means the Las Vegas Raiders will be going forward with Jackson Powers-Johnson as their starting center. To me, it doesn't get more clear than that. Jackson Powers-Johnson walks in, greets himself, and says, "I'm the starting center." That tells me this guy already knows. He's already been told that, hey, you're going to be the guy to start at center. We have to realize we're at that point where, these guys are being assigned positions, right? When we see Caleb Rogers with his right hand in the ground or his left hand in the ground, we know what position he's generally speaking going to be competing for, right? When we see Charles Grant get announced as an offensive tackle, we know he's going to be competing with DJ Glaze to potentially start at right tackle, right? Or develop into that right tackle for the Raiders. We know that this is kind of how it works, right? We're at that point where you're going to now practice, especially keeping in mind that, Chip Kelly comes over to the Raiders, a new scheme and system. Pete Carroll comes over to the Raiders, a new scheme and system. Right, this is not last year's team. This is a completely different team. So you're learning new plays. You're learning the playbook. You're learning certain concepts and certain things. And I almost feel like the Raiders are at that point where if Jackson Powers-Johnson's telling Ashton Jeanty that I'm your starting center, I'm pretty confident that he's been already told that you'll be that guy. And I know some people are going to say, hey, does it really matter, right? If he's your starting center, if he's your starting guard, we know he was going to start among that offensive line. I think it does matter, right? I think it makes a massive difference if you're a starting guard or if you're a starting center. I think starting centers, and more than that, I think having a top 2 or 3 starting centers specifically, right? Like, let's say you're an offensive line and your center's like the top 2 or 3 center in the NFL, versus if you're an offensive line with you have a top 2 or 3 guard in the NFL, I think having a center that's a top two or three guy is more impactful, right? And I'll give you guys just a quick example. The best guard in the NFL right now, a lot of people think is Chris Lindstrom of the Atlanta Falcons. I think his impact as a guard is less than someone like, let's say, Creed Humphrey, who I think is the best center in the NFL. Take a step further. I don't personally think Chris Lindstrom's the best. I think Tyler Smith, the left guard of the Cowboys, is the best guard in the NFL. And his impact, I think, for that entire offensive line is less, right? Not that him individually is less. It's just the offensive line of the Cowboys, you look at it last year, wasn't that good, right? To me, if you have a great center, you could be a great offensive line, right? And I'm not saying it can't work the other way. I just feel like centers are a little bit more important than guards. This is my personal opinion. And when you think about Jackson Powers-Johnson, and I don't say this lightly, this guy is one of the best centers that were prospects coming out of college that I had ever seen, right? In 8 to 10 years of scouting the NFL draft, I can tell you guys from right now, the only guys that come close to Jackson Powers-Johnson is probably Creed Humphrey when he came out of Oklahoma. He went to the Kansas City Chiefs. He's the highest paid center in the NFL right now. And then Landon Dickerson, who was coming out of Alabama, he was their starting center, got moved to left guard for the Philadelphia Eagles. He's now one of the highest paid left guards in the NFL. Those are the two best center prospects that I had seen. Jackson Powers-Johnson is probably better than both of those guys. And I don't just say that because I'm a Raiders fan. Like, as someone who actually watches tape, if you guys go to Twitter, the receipts are on Twitter, right? I literally said I think Jackson Powers-Johnson is the greatest center prospect that I have ever seen. To me, this guy is definitely elite and he's different, and putting him in at center makes a lot more sense. Think about the advantage that the Las Vegas Raiders get with Powers-Johnson. Right? Think about Powers-Johnson lined up as a center. right? Let's say Jackson Powers Johnson's lined up as a center. He has a 2-eye technique defensive tackle, which generally means that that guy has the A gap in his run fit, right? And let's say the Raiders have an outside zone play to the right. So Jackson Powers Johnson has a reach block to that 2-eye technique defensive tackle. What that means is this guy has to cut this guy off. And if you cut him off, that creates that cutback lane, right? And if you don't cut it off and that guy stays in that run fit and he chases it backside, then there's no cutback lane for Ashton Jeanty. It makes a massive difference if your center can make those blocks or not. And, with the guy, for example, what we had at center last year, we weren't always able to get those, right? Honor James wasn't always able to cut guys off in those type of situations. Powers Johnson will cut this guy off. And not only will he reach in front of this guy, but if he's unable to reach, this guy will slingshot, which he's done before, right? Slingshot's an advanced technique to cut a guy off getting behind him, right? Jackson Powers Johnson, to me, what this guy has shown us on tape is really, really, really impressive. And he just gives you the advantage, right? With what he can kind of do in terms of his actual tape. He'll cut a guy off and he'll allow Ashton Jeanty to have that backside cut. If he's not able to get in front of a guy, he'll pancake a guy, right? Like he'll move him out of that gap. And that could theoretically give the running back a lane then to the left side of Ashton Jeanty, right? Or left side of Jackson Powers Johnson, assuming the run's to the right. This guy's a phenomenal player, and we saw him dominating in his rookie year. Keep in mind, Jackson Powers Johnson did not have an offseason, right? This guy literally did not have an offseason as a center, right? He was playing guard basically. And also keep in mind, at Oregon, he was a center in his final year at Oregon, which is his third year, but he was a guard that rotated in his second season. And he didn't play a whole lot his first year at Oregon, right? He really started playing in that second year. He was a guard in that second year. He only moved to center in that third season. Now, he's played center, obviously, in high school as well, but just think about the development that still needs to kind of happen. This guy has not had a full offseason as a starting center at the highest level, right? The NFL level. But he'll get that this season, right? He'll be that guy where he is the starting center. And again, I always go back to that John Spytek not committing to Jackson Powers Johnson. I understand why you don't want to do that, right? Sometimes, if you say Powers Johnson's a starting guard, in round 2 or 3, some team might say, hey, there's a center out there that's the best center. We want to move in front of John Spytek because Powers Johnson's their guard and they need a center. I understand why you don't want to give that away. But the fact that Jackson Powers Johnson is officially going to be the center for the Raiders has me really, really, really fired up. And again, I don't say this lightly. I think Powers Johnson's going to become one of the greatest centers in the NFL. I really do think that. NFL history specifically. I really do think he has that type of upside. He's 21 years old. Let's talk about the offensive line a little bit, right? The Raiders on the offensive line this season are going to be very, very, very interesting. Earlier, I mentioned that in order to have a top tier offensive line, you got to have a great center. The Raiders have that, and we don't not only have a great center, but we have some other pieces as well. The Raiders have Kolton Miller, who I think is a top 12 left tackle in the NFL. Top 15 overall tackle, right? He's probably not like the 12th best left tackle. He's probably like 7 or 8. But there's a lot that you can like with Kolton Miller, right? And then at left guard, it's kind of up in the air, but based off of some of the reports we're getting, Caleb Rogers is most likely going to be the Raiders starting left guard. And I say that because I think Charles Grant's going to compete with DJ Glaze at right guard. And with him potentially competing with a guy like DJ Glaze, I think it would be smart at the worst case scenario for Charles Grant to take some guard snaps, right? Potentially play right guard a little bit. For him, if he learns the right tackle position, keep in mind, he was a left tackle in college, so he has to go to the other side, has to get used to, the right foot drops, the right hand comes down as opposed to the left foot dropping, left hand into the ground. If the Raiders can get this guy to start competing at that right tackle position, learn that position, worst case scenario, he goes to right guard, right? That gives the Raiders a ton of upside, and it's a young-ass offensive line as well. To me, Charles Grant playing right guard, Caleb Rogers playing left guard, DJ Glaze right tackle, that'd be a really, really good offensive line. And of course, Charles Grant has the upside to start at right tackle as well, with DJ Glaze potentially jumping to the inside. And that doesn't include Alex Kappa, Dylan Parham, and Jordan Meredith. I think Jordan Meredith is one of the best backup interior offensive linemen to have because he can play all 3 spots. Dylan Parham would be arguably just as great, right? I think Dylan Parham could play left guard, center, and right guard as well. So I think that would be really, really, really beneficial for the Raiders as well. I think now that the draft's over, that Alex Kappa signing was a terrible signing, given the fact that I don't even know if he's going to make the roster. And if he does, well, then does Dylan Parr make the roster? Does Jordan Meredith make the roster? Which guy gets cut? Right? Because you're not going to go into this season with all of those guys that you basically have. Right? Thayer Munford, just counting the guys that the Raiders have right now. If you think about it, you got Colton Miller, Charles Grant, Jordan Meredith, Caleb Rogers. You have Jackson Powers Johnson. You got Dylan Parham, DJ Glaze, Thayer Munford. That's 8 guys. That doesn't include Will Putnam. That doesn't include Alex Kappa. That doesn't include Dalton Wagner, which puts you at 11. Doesn't include the UDFAs, right? In case any of those guys make it. There's 3 right now that are offensive linemen. That puts you at 13 offensive linemen. So you're going to have to cut probably 4 or 5 of those guys, which means some guys going to get cut, right? Even if you cut the 3 UDFAs, I still think we have to cut 1 or 2 more, and it'll be interesting to see which guys do get cut, right? Obviously, Dalton Wagner will probably end up getting cut if all 3 UDFA guys get cut. That puts you at 9, so there's still a chance one other guy gets cut. So we'll see what ends up happening as we kind of go forward. Again, I think the Raiders are in a really, really, really interesting spot, right? We'll see what ends up happening among that offensive line. I think we have a ton of upside and potential in that unit. Love that Jackson Powers Johnson is officially going to be the starting center of the Raiders. There's another interesting story that's just kind of been coming out that I've seen people talk about, specifically related to the value of Donte Thornton Jr., who the Raiders drafted in the 4th round. Some people think that that Donte Thornton should have been a lot higher. Some people think this guy was a fringe 2nd round pick. Some guys had him as a 3rd round pick. There were people that actually value this guy a lot higher than where he ultimately ended up getting taken. And one of the things that people have questioned about him, and it's kind of the unknown factor, it's kind of like the upside and the potential factor with Donte Thornton, is that at Tennessee, this guy was really, really limited, right? The route tree that this guy had was limited. And Thornton was kind of asked about this as well. According to Thornton, it was the offensive system at Tennessee that limited his routes in college. So Donte Thornton said this at his pro day in Tennessee. He said that, talking about the route tree, that was mostly every team's main talking point, was asking with the offense that we run here in Tennessee, if I'm able to run those pro style routes, I have to be very intentional. Playing 2 seasons here at Tennessee, we don't have the same wide route tree that most pro offenses have. So basically, this guy has been asked a little bit about the route tree, right? How's your route tree? Are you able to run those actual routes? And even he mentioned it at the pro day that this is what every NFL team that I've spoken to has kind of asked me. I pulled up some of the stats. You guys can check them out right here. This guy only had 36 targets in college, and he only ran 157 routes. So it's not like this guy's out there running every single route on the route tree. And this was one of the reasons why he went in the 4th round, right? Although the upside might be, hey, this guy could be a 2nd round pick had he, stayed at Oregon, which is where he was at before he came to Tennessee. Had he went to Georgia or Alabama and he ran more routes, this guy could have potentially went higher, right? That's at least what some of the scouts think. But when you look at some of the routes that he does mostly run, they're all kind of the same type of route, right? So first and foremost, the go route, right? He ran that 27 times, which is a big part of the routes that he did run. 17% of his routes were go routes. 21% of them were curls, while 21.7% were also hitches. So think about this. A curl and a hitch are very, very similar routes, right? If you guys look at the route tree here, here's what a curl looks like, and here's what a hitch looks like, right? It's basically the same thing. The only difference is a curl is going to be a little bit longer than a hitch. So think about what's happening here with some of these stats. One of the main routes this guy runs is obviously going to be the go route, right? You got the speed. He's going to run deep. That makes sense. The other route this guy runs is either the curl or the hitch, right? Which is either going to be like a 2-3 yard stop or like a 6-7 yard stop, right? Again, very, very similar route. And then he has one other route that he runs a lot as well, which is basically going to be a slant or a post. And the slant's not as high. I think this platform measures posts and slants kind of the same. Post route, these are skinny posts, right? Not necessarily deep posts. He runs a lot of post routes, right? 28 post routes. You also see that the over route, right? Running across the middle of the field, kind of similar to a post, kind of similar to a slant. He runs that as well a lot, right? So again, just backing it up, putting it together. This guy ran basically 3 routes most of his NFL career, right? This guy has not had to run a full route tree, which some people do think has kind of limited his stock a little bit. And even he acknowledged it, right, at his pro day. He said that a lot of NFL teams have kind of talked to me about this. Most of the routes this guy's running is obviously a go route. The other route is going to be a hitch or a curl route, 3, 4, 5, 6 yard stop route. Just look right back at the quarterback. And then, of course, you got the skinny post. You got the slant, which is going to be a little bit shallower than the actual post. And then you also see that he ran a lot of over routes. Over routes are kind of similar to post routes as well. That's basically what this guy ran a lot, right? And some people do hold it against him a little bit, right? Some people think that, hey, can he actually run a full route tree? We're going to find that out, right? And I think for the Raiders, a lot of upside with this kid, man. I understand we got him in the 4th round, but this is why teams put a board together, right? And this is why you rank guys on your board, right? Donte Thornton might have been the highest guy for a number of picks, right? The Raiders took Darian Porter in the 3rd round, the early 3rd round pick we had. They took 2 offensive linemen, right? And Caleb Rogers and Charles Grant at the end of the 3rd round. All right, so you're taking essentially 3 3rd round guys. There's a chance Donte Thornton was like neck and neck with those guys, and we got him at the beginning of the 4th round, right? So there's a real chance the Raiders love this guy enough, and they felt like, hey, the upside and potential is there. And I'm glad that the Raiders got this guy in. I think Thornton has a ton of upside and potential. And I mentioned this previously. I wouldn't be surprised if the Raiders have to move off of some of these other guys that we have. If you guys remember, I mentioned this like 4 or 5 days ago that, hey, there's a chance the Raiders trade Trey Tucker, right? I'm not saying that it's going to happen, but what I'm saying is we have a lot of wide receivers where there's a lot of roles, right? Like a lot of new guys coming in, the roles that the Raiders can, kind of have for this offense. Do we have a role for every single one of these wide receivers? Well, yesterday we actually officially cut a couple of these guys. So Tyreek McAllister, who showed some upside, has been cut. Obviously, Christian Wilkerson was also cut. So the Raiders are starting to move some of these guys, right? But we're still going to have to get it even further down beyond that, right? And that doesn't include some of the guys that we picked up, right? Zachary Franklin out of Illinois, very, very high upside player. Kyle Phillips, we can see what this guy can kind of bring to the Raiders as well. We're going to find out a lot about the Raiders, right? And I do like the room that we're kind of putting out there right now. Jacoby Myers, Jack Besh, Donte Thornton, Trey Tucker. Those are 4 receivers with a ton of upside, right? And Jacoby Myers is already kind of the guy he'll be. He's already shown us the type of player he is. The other 3 guys, kind of unknown still, right? What they can develop into. But I will say this with Trey Tucker. This is going to be his 3rd year in the NFL. This is the year he has to hit close to, 700 plus yards. And if he doesn't, I'm not sure if we're going to keep him as like he's a developmental guy long term, right? It might even be his last year if that's the case, right? So we'll see what ends up happening. Finally, I want to just wrap this video up talking about some of the traveling that will be happening this season, because the Raiders actually are at a pretty big advantage here relative to some of the teams. So the Raiders this year will travel 18,000 miles. You guys see us pretty much in the league, in the middle of the NFL league average. But the Chargers on the other side, 37,000 miles these guys are going to be traveling. That's absolutely wild. The Raiders and Chargers are like 2 hours apart. I don't even know what the miles are between LA and Vegas, but they're not that far apart. 18,000 miles is not that much, but 37,000 for the Chargers, to me, that's ridiculous. Absolutely ridiculous. And, to me, being able to travel more versus not as much does make a big difference, right? Like, for example, the Cincinnati Bengals are only going to travel 8,700 miles. Think about how easy of a travel schedule that is. The Bengals may be able to fly in literally like, hey, it's 6 p.m. We have a game tomorrow. We can travel in from 7:30. We're at the team hotel because the miles are so small, right? We're going to essentially get there. We can sleep there that night. We have the game the next day. We're back home that same day. Versus the Chargers, it's like, hey, we have a game on Sunday, but we should travel out Friday because it's going to take us, 7 hours to get to wherever we're getting, right? And then you have a long travel potentially as well. Well, you don't want your guys to be tired, so you might even get there 2 days early, right? And then the Chargers might have to go across the country, and then they might say, hey, let's just stay out here because it's back-to-back games on the East Coast. All right, it just adds a whole nother element into it out there. And I just wanted to kind of show this to you guys because it is interesting. how easy it is for certain East Coast teams, right? All these teams that have the easy schedule are East Coast teams, right? Cincinnati, Buffalo, Baltimore, Detroit, Chicago, New England. Yeah, so it is what it is. But the hard teams are always going to be the West Coast teams, right? Chargers, Rams, Seahawks, Niners, Denver. It is what it is. But let me know what you guys think. I hope you guys enjoyed this video. Obviously, there's not a lot of news that's kind of coming out, but I do obviously want to continue to cover the Raiders pretty much every single day. If it's possible, we will skip some days as well. Still getting the setup, the room set up. I have a couple of things that I've ordered that I need here before I can fully set it all up. Let me know what you guys think, man. Thumbs up, subscribe, and I'll see you guys next time with another video.